I think since October the 7th, for all of us, we were focused on one issue only: Israel, her future, her destiny, her welfare, the hostages, soldiers, people living in Gaza. I think it's very important that we should articulate our sadness for innocent Palestinians who have suffered. We all know the reasons why they suffered. It's because their own leaders, Hamas, purposefully placed them in harm's way. But nonetheless, our sensitive Jewish souls feel the sadness of other people, and it has been an exceptionally trying time for us to witness their suffering, which continues now because Hamas is trying its best to keep on to their hold of governing the area, and it's absolutely tragic what is happening to so many people. So in terms of the emphasis of my role, I have continued to do everything else that one would usually do, but I've lost count of the number of visits to Israel since the 7th of October. It's well over a dozen, continuous. My first few visits were to destinations down south on the border with Gaza, to families of the bereaved, of the injured, speaking to national leaders in Israel. You know, a lot of what I do is behind the scenes. I have certain principles, and by the way, they're debatable because I can see the logic of contrary arguments. I've always believed that a chief rabbi should never publicly criticize Israel. And my predecessors didn't hold by that view, but I believe it's important. We've got enough enemies out there. Why must the world hear as well from a chief rabbi that Israel isn't perfect? But it's been really, really challenging because there are policies, there are tactics, and so on. And it started before the 7th of October with the whole judicial reform issue, which divided the Jewish world in a tragic way. But I have continued to engage with Israel's political leadership on a one-to-one basis, face-to-face, because it's important that they hear our reflections, what our views are. So the fact that I haven't publicly criticized Israel does not mean that I haven't conveyed messages to them directly. What you will have heard from me is public praise for Israel where it is due, and our pride in Israel, which certainly is the case, and our prayers for the hostages. And I've just come from the university campus, and in the Q&A there, one of the lovely lady students said to me, do I believe that religious leaders should stick exclusively to religion, or should they sometimes engage in politics? Really good question. So I said, I'm going to speak for myself as chief rabbi. The chief rabbi should be involved in religion, not politics. And I said, that's a rule, it's not a law. A law has no exceptions. A rule has exceptions. And I'm somebody who made an exception, because in 2019, November, as chief rabbi, I issued a political intervention of the highest order, where I called upon the British people not to vote for Labour in the general election, which was to take place on the 12th of December 2019, because Corbyn was leading the country at that time. It was simply unheard of for any chief rabbi to go anywhere remotely close to telling people who to vote for, who not to vote for. All I said was, don't vote for Corbyn. Well, who else do you have? Means the Conservative. I didn't say vote Conservative. I said don't vote for Corbyn because of what he represented. And it was, thank God, well received in the country. To this day, I get terrible hate mail for having spoken out against Corbyn. In addition to other hate mail, which not everybody likes me, but I take it as a compliment. Because if by sticking up for Israel and for Jews and for Judaism and for decency, if that's what some people don't like, that's not going to stop me from doing what is right and speaking out in a responsible way. But that intervention was pure politics, but it was necessary. At the time, I said, this is a one-off, right? Since the start of the chief rabbinate in this country in 1704, it hasn't happened before. Please God, it will not happen again. Much to my sadness, it has happened 4 more times. And those 4 occasions have all been with the current government, where I've issued public criticisms of policies of theirs relating to Israel, which I believe have been in place. But at the same time, I've maintained good relationships with the Prime Minister and with government, which is really very important. And so this is part of the dimension of life that has changed. There has been a very positive element. I attribute it to some of the silver linings of the dark clouds of the conflict. We have seen a strengthening of Jewish identity. And so many people who previously weren't involved, they're recognizing their Jewish roots. The Yiddish neshamas are driving them in a certain direction. I'll share with you just one more anecdote and then we'll go to the next question. So Valerie and I paid a visit to the Jersey Jewish community this summer. And we remembered our last visit, which was in 2019. And there was a comment I heard in 2019. It's the kind of comment you don't get out of your head. Because then I was seated at a table like this one with the heads of the community, and I was making small talk, and I said, what time do you start your services on Shabbos morning? Because this was the Sunday afternoon. So they said, 10:15. I said, oh, 10:15, that's quite late. They said, oh, there's a reason for it. What's the reason? They said, 2 of our members live on Guernsey. And there's a flight every Shabbos morning at 9:45 a.m. It's a 10-minute flight, and then they come off and they get in a taxi. By the time they get to shul, it's 10:15. We don't want to start without them. So as I say, now that I mentioned you, just like me, you won't get it out of your head. All right. So on this occasion, I said to the leaders of the community, your 2 members from Guernsey, how are they? Are they here today? They said, oh, it's very sad. One of them moved to Paris and the other one died. Oh. But they said, Chief Rabbi, did you know there are at least 40 Jews living in Guernsey? I said, what are you talking about? They said, I said, there used to be 2. They're not there, and now they're 40. They said, yes. At least 40 Jews. I said, what do you mean? They said, it's all thanks to Guernsey for Gaza. I said, what's that? They said, on Saturday, the 3rd of December, 2023, that's just 3 months after 7th of October, there was an awful demonstration in St. Peter Port, the capital of Guernsey. It was pro-Hamas, it was anti-Semitic, it was no good, globalized intifada, river to the sea, all of this stuff. And there was a scenario which played out in certain offices and places during the week afterwards, where something like this happened. A fellow said to the guy in the desk next to him, you're not looking your regular happy self, what's the problem? He said, Guernsey for Gaza. So the fellow said, well, what's wrong with Guernsey for Gaza? And he said, well, I'm Jewish and I feel threatened. And the guy said, oh, there's somebody down the corridor, he was saying a similar thing. Why didn't you go and talk to him? So they were put in touch, and they suddenly realized that they were both Jewish. And then each one put them in touch with other people. And before you knew it, by the time it came to Hanukkah was late, end of December 2023, they held a Hanukkah party for the Jews of Guernsey, and over 40 people came. And then they had a Seder for Pesach, and then they had to get together Rosh Hashanah. What caused it all? Guernsey for Gaza. Now that's not the way we want to go in terms of strengthening Jewish identity, but I've seen it all over the place, all over the world. This conflict has brought us closer together, and it has strengthened our connection to our Jewish roots. And that's another change. because as Chief Rabbi, I want to encourage people to be more connected for the right reasons. Because we've got the best recipe in the world for happiness and for contentment, and that's why we should be connected with our Jewishness. So life certainly has changed.
The only downside, Rabbi, to that,